Welcome, students, to today's Explainer. We're diving into an incredibly famous piece of literature today, an extract from Charles Dickens' absolute classic, Oliver Twist. We're going to go step by step to fully grasp the challenging vocabulary, the stark visual contrasts, and, of course, the profound social issues at the heart of this story. So, let's get right into it.
Before we start, I want you to ask yourself a quick question. Have you ever been so hungry that you would risk absolutely everything? And I'm not talking about, being a little late for lunch. We're talking about a deep, painful, relentless hunger. To truly understand the gravity of our story today, we really need to put ourselves in the shoes of a child who has literally nothing, facing an authority that has absolutely everything. Keep that empathy in mind as we set the scene.
Chapter 1, The Arrival at the Workhouse. Our story begins with little Oliver's terrifying arrival at a dark, freezing Victorian building known as a workhouse. Oliver hasn't even been inside these cold walls for 15 minutes when a man named Mr. Bumble tells him he has to appear before the board. Imagine how terrifying this is for a small, frightened orphan. He has no clue what a board even is. He's just completely astonished, not knowing whether to laugh or cry at his terrifying new reality. Now, to understand who is actually leading Oliver around, we need to look at our first vocabulary word. Mr. Bumble is a beadle, which is an official of a church. In our story, he represents strict authority and the incredibly harsh rules of the parish that runs the workhouse. He's the guy firmly grasping Oliver by the cuff and tapping him on the back with a cane just to make him obey. Notice the incredible visual contrast we get here. Mr. Bumble leads Oliver into this massive, whitewashed room. Seated around a table are 8 or 10 very well-fed, fat gentlemen. At the head of the table, in this high armchair, sits a particularly large gentleman with a round, red face. Oliver is trembling, weeping bitterly, and utterly terrified as these towering men question him. He's so nervous he literally bows to the table itself. This brilliantly illustrates the core conflict of the story. On one side, we have the board. Wealthy, well-fed men wearing crisp white waistcoats, sitting comfortably and making these grand philosophical decisions. One of them even gruffly tells Oliver to pray for the people who feed and take care of him. On the exact opposite side, we have Oliver, a fragile, terrified orphan who is weeping and stammering. Instead of feeling pity for a starving child, they mock him and call him a fool. It really highlights their cruelty. The board immediately tells Oliver he's there to be educated and taught a useful trade. But, their idea of a useful trade is completely brutal. A surly gentleman tells Oliver he'll begin to pick oakum tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Oakum is this loose fiber obtained by untwisting and picking apart old, tough ropes. It was incredibly painful work that made your hands bleed, and this was expected of a starving child starting before the sun even came up. While Oliver sobs himself to sleep on a rough, hard bed, the board makes a decision that will change his life forever. They decide the poor should be given only 2 choices: starve quickly outside or gradually inside. They mandate that the inmates will only receive 3 meals of thin gruel a day and an onion twice a week. That's the entirety of their diet. Let's look at the reality of that decision. The room where the boys are fed is this massive, freezing cold stone hall. At one end sits a huge copper bowl. The master, dressed in an apron and looking quite fat himself, ladles out the food. The starving boys form a long line, receiving exactly 1 tiny basinful and absolutely no more. We really need to understand what they were actually eating here. Our next vocabulary word is gruel. Gruel is a very thin liquid food made of oats or rice boiled in water. It is almost entirely water with practically 0 nutritional value. For hardworking, growing children, it's just completely inadequate. The effects of this cruel diet were just devastating. For 3 long months, the inmates literally shrank in size. Oliver and his companions suffered the absolute tortures of slow starvation. Young boys naturally have excellent appetites, but here they were reduced to polishing their bowls with their spoons until the basins shone. They'd even suck their fingers just to get stray splashes of the gruel. It was truly a desperate situation. And the crucial point here is that this level of starvation drives people to madness. There was one boy who was tall for his age, and he had this wild, hungry look in his eye. He whispered a dark threat to his companions. He told them that unless he got another basin of gruel per day, he was afraid that one night he might actually eat the small, weak boy who slept next to him. And looking at his eyes, the other boys believed him.
The word Dickens uses here is voracious. It literally means wanting great quantities of food. This wasn't just your standard grumbling stomach. This was a wild, unmanageable hunger that was driving these boys to absolute desperation.
Driven by this wild terror, the boys hatched a desperate plan. Step 1, they held a secret council. Step 2, they cast lots, basically drawing straws, to decide who would do the unthinkable. And Step 3, the lot fell to little Oliver Twist. He was chosen to ask for more.
The evening arrived. The gruel was served and, of course, disappeared in seconds. The boys began whispering to each other, winking at Oliver, nudging him forward. Oliver was just a child, but he stood up from the table. Basin and spoon in hand, he slowly walked forward toward the master. He was completely reckless with misery and hunger.
And here we reach the emotional climax of our story. Oliver looks up, holding his empty bowl with both hands, somewhat alarmed by his own courage, and he says, "Please, sir, I want some more." In a system designed to slowly starve him into submission, this tiny, weak orphan just challenged the entire authority of the workhouse. It was a massive act of rebellion. The reaction is explosive. The master turns completely pale. He is so utterly shocked by this tiny rebel that he literally has to cling to the copper pot just to support himself. "What?" he says faintly. Then he strikes Oliver on the head with the heavy ladle and shrieks loudly for the beetle. The text uses two powerful words to describe the reaction of everyone else in the room: stupefied and paralyzed. To be stupefied is to be completely shocked, unable to think properly. And to be paralyzed in this context means becoming completely motionless out of sheer wonder and fear. The assistants and the other boys were frozen in absolute terror at Oliver's courage. Mr. Bumble rushes into the solemn meeting of the board in a state of sheer panic, crying out, "Mr. Limbkins, I beg your pardon, sir. Oliver Twist has asked for more." The gentlemen are horrified. Every face shows sheer disbelief at the news. The gentleman in the white waistcoat instantly predicts, "That boy will be hung." The consequences fall very, very swiftly. Following an excited discussion, Oliver is ordered into instant confinement. The very next morning, a notice is pasted on the outside of the workhouse gate, offering a £5 reward to anyone willing to take Oliver Twist off their hands. Let's lock in our final vocabulary words here. Confinement means being locked away in a prison or closed room, entirely alone. And the board is offering Oliver up to be an apprentice, someone who works under a skilled person. Basically, they are selling a child for £5, all because he dared to ask for enough food to survive. The brilliant mind who crafted this story is the renowned English novelist Charles Dickens. Due to his own father's imprisonment when he was young, Charles actually had to leave school and work in a brutal shoe factory as a child. He used his phenomenal literary career to shine a bright light on the severe social issues and poverty of his time, drawing directly from his own harsh childhood experiences. Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. Was Oliver a fool for asking for more, knowing the harsh punishment he would likely face? Or was he a brave voice standing up for all those starving boys? Think deeply about how authority operates, how poverty is treated, and where true courage actually comes from. Keep learning, keep questioning, and thank you so much for joining me in this analysis.